Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me for episode 27 of In My Plant-Based Kitchen. I am Emma. I'm a certified plant-based chef and a registered holistic nutritionist, and it's week 4 of Veganuary. And for the last few weeks, we've been talking about breakfast, lunch, dinner, transition strategies, ideas for including more healthy plant-based meals and ideas into your life, regardless of whether you are trying to make a transition completely to vegetarian or vegan, or just include more healthy plant foods in your diet. And today we're going to talk about desserts and a little bit about snacks too. I wanted to throw in a little bit about snacks. So let's do that first. Snacks are often difficult for people because the snack foods that we tend to enjoy tend to be things like chips and cookies and those filler foods that are often very highly processed and so on. So when it comes to snacks, my advice would be to try to just keep it really, really simple. Hummus and veggies, avoid the crackers if you can. Your fresh fruit, those things that don't need to take a lot of time to prepare. They're things that you can grab and go when you're hungry. But again, just like we were talking about in other weeks, the preparation is key, making sure that you have some of those healthy things on hand that you can just pull out of the fridge as you're going out the door, or that you can give to your kids as they're coming home from school, that kind of thing. So like I said, hummus and veggies, or some kind of dip and veggies are some of my favorites. And it's a great way to get nutritious things into your kids if they like, or into yourself if you like those types of things. Edamame spread, different kinds of bean dips, even there's a ranch dress, like a ranch dip that I often do for gatherings and things like that. That's a Drina Burton recipe, and it's made has a cashew base with all kinds of lovely flavors and so on. So you're getting some nutrition in with your snacks. Other ideas would be smoothies, or steamed edamame maybe, but it really is just about figuring out a few things that you like, making sure that they're whole foods and keeping them on hand, spending the little bit of extra money for really nice, fresh, organic fruit, so that these things are really appealing and they're things that you want to eat when you're hungry. So I don't want to go on too much about snacks because today is mostly about desserts. And I think the reason I really wanted to talk about this today is I get a lot of questions about what can I eat for a sweet treat if I'm trying to be on a healthier diet, if I'm really, and this is a really key word actually, is diet. With a whole foods plant-based diet, it really is, I really like to emphasize the word lifestyle rather than diet, because that's where you're going to get the benefits, is when you make it sustainable over a period of time. And in order to do that, it's really important that you don't feel like you're on a diet, that you don't feel like you're being deprived and you can never eat anything yummy and sweet and tasty again. So I think it's really, really important to have a few recipes that you know you can make, that your family loves, that feel like a treat. It's great to have a go-to cake for birthdays or celebrations. There's one that Drina Burton, again, you can tell she's one of my favorites. She has a sweet potato cake, but there are things like black bean brownies or chickpea brownies, or these recipes that use whole sweeteners, or less refined sweeteners, less refined products. They're still really tasty and really yummy, but you're going to pack a bunch of nutrition in, because they sneak in things like chickpeas or black beans. They use whole grains and whole grain flours and things like that. In terms of desserts, another one of my favorites would be like a crumble of some kind, with berries and apples and that kind of thing, or just baked fruit can be a really, really nice treat. It can feel really special if you really There are lots of great recipes out there for baked fruit that have added roasted nuts and added spices and herbs, more spices, but things that make them feel really special and delicious. You could serve them with a cashew cream or even a coconut whipped cream. And they're going to be something that everybody enjoys as a dessert, but it's not going to be something that's going to add a lot of, sugars, or it's going to be another part of your meal that has some nutritional benefit and is still very enjoyable. What other ideas are there? Well, the one that we're going to make today. This is one of my favorites. I'm a chocolate chip cookie. I love chocolate chip cookies. So when I decided to try to make a few years back a chocolate chip cookie that I wasn't going to feel guilty about eating. And this is what I came up with. And it's been a very popular recipe. So I wanted to share it today because I think that it demonstrates a lot of the things that I'm talking about today. It's whole foods. It doesn't have any refined sugar in it. It is still very sweet and delicious and adds nutrition to your diet rather than being something that you have to regret eating or feel that, you've fallen off the wagon or whatever. So let's get started. The first thing is we're going to use a combination of whole grain sprouted spelt flour, just 1/4 cup. So spelt flour does still have some gluten in it, but it's lower in gluten. So it's not a completely gluten-free cookie, but it is lower in gluten for sure. I'm going to use some whole rolled oats. So this is part of my grain, but it's more of a whole grain than, an oat flour or another like refined flour would be. And I actually haven't tried this before. This is a bit of an experiment, but I've been reading Dr. Greger's How Not to Age, I think, yes. And he talks about the benefits of adding wheat germ on a daily basis to your diet for improved cognitive aging. So I've been trying to get wheat germ in everywhere I can, and I thought this would be a great place to add some wheat germ. So normally I add another couple of tablespoons of this sprouted spelt flour, but today I'm going to try the wheat germ. And then if it turns out great, then I'm going to add that to the recipe. So I will adjust the recipe that I share based on the results that I get today. So if it works, I will give you this recipe. If it doesn't, I'll give you my old recipe. So, okay. The next thing we're going to want is 3 tablespoons of shredded coconut. This is unsweetened coconut. This is just going to give these cookies a really nice chewy, so it's going to help to add to the chewiness of them. And that is important for you want to really consider the texture. And I'm going to talk about adjusting and making your own recipes up in a moment. We're also going to want some baking powder. So a tablespoon, a teaspoon. I've got half a teaspoon here, so I need 2 of these. And this, of course, is going to be your leavener, helping the cookies to rise up a little bit. The salt is optional. Salt helps to bring flavors together. So I'm going to just use a pinch of salt. This doesn't make a ton of cookies. I don't like to have too many cookies around. Although sometimes I double it and then put some of them in the freezer. So that's an option as well. And then I'm going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of ground cardamom. Ground cardamom is a really nice digestive, and it also helps to balance blood sugars. So besides adding a really lovely, unique flavor to these cookies, it's a very mild background flavor. So you can try it or you can leave it out if you prefer, but I recommend giving it a try. I love it with the cardamom. And then the last dry ingredient we're going to use is some dairy-free mini chocolate chips. So there's about 3/4 cup there. And this, of course, is going to add quite a lot of sweetness to our cookie as well. If you are really watching your sugar, you could always use carob chips or something like that instead. Or if you don't want to use chocolate chips, you could use raisins or some other kind of dried fruit instead here. So just mix that up. Those are our dry ingredients. Our wet ingredients are 3/4 of a cup of almond butter, which I actually have already mixed up because it's a natural one, and it really needed some help unclumping, let's say that. So I use this almond butter. It's just literally almonds ground up, and that's a nice thing to use instead of, so what's happening here is we're going to use this instead of a butter or margarine or oil or something like that. And so even though this is lending the fat to the recipe, which you need to have in something like a cookie, it's adding a whole fat. It's adding all the nutrition of almonds and the fat along with it. So you're getting the nutrition along with, you're not just getting, empty calories. I've also got 2 flax eggs. And so they are flax eggs, and you can also use chia eggs here. I've used both in this recipe. So this is 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed and 6 tablespoons. So it's 1 tablespoon to 3 tablespoons of water for 1 egg. So this is doubled. So 2 tablespoons and 6 tablespoons. And you can see how nice and it's like an egg-like texture. And so this is, again, a really nice thing to use instead of eggs, because eggs, they're very high in cholesterol and saturated fat, and they're something that a lot of us are looking to get away from. And it makes these cookies, you can taste them without worrying about getting salmonella. So they're a really great ingredient to use instead. You can use chia, you can use flax. You're going to get a bunch of omega-3s. You're going to get a whole bunch of fiber. You're going to get some protein and lots of different minerals, depending on which one you're using. Really, really wonderful sub to make. There are lots of different egg replacers. And it really depends on what you're making, where you want to use them. And I could do a more extensive episode on baking and how to substitute different ingredients and so on, if people are interested. So if you are, send me an email or a message with the form below, or comment here if you like, and let me know, and I can definitely put that in the mix. The next thing we're going to want is 1/2 cup of date paste. And so this is our sweetener. This is our whole food sweetener. And I made a little short video that I'm hoping will turn out, and I can link to in the comments below, or in the show notes. But essentially all this is dates that have been soaked overnight. And then I blended them with, I just blended the dates with the water that was soaking in, and some vanilla, a little bit of vanilla, and a pinch of salt. Salt is optional. So this is going to replace any sugar. So these are sugar-free cookies in terms of any kind of refined sugar. This adds a beautiful sweetness. Actually, I've decided to call it date caramel instead. I forgot. Date caramel, because it has a lovely caramel taste. Paste is just not a very nice visual, but it's absolutely delicious. I've talked about this before. You can use it as a sweetener in place of sugar in, everything from spaghetti sauces. If you add a little bit of sweetener to your tomatoes to tamp down the acidity of tomatoes. Oatmeal is a great place to use it. There's lots of places to use it, and you can make it and freeze it. It freezes really well. So a really nice thing to know about if you don't already. So we need, I think, 1/2 cup of this, 1/2 cup of date paste, date caramel. So you can see how nice and nice and thick this is. And like I said, I'll link to the little short video that I made about this, but it's very, very easy to make. The hardest thing is just getting it to the right consistency, but it just takes a little bit of patience. in your blender or your, I usually use a food processor because it's easier to manage, I find. So we've got our almond, our almond butter. We've got our, and you could use nut butter, any kind of nut butter, cashew butter or peanut butter, even if you like peanut butter chocolate chip cookies. We've got our date paste. We have got our flax eggs, and I'm gonna put a little splash of vanilla in, and I think that's all of our wet ingredients. All right, so just mix that up really well. You can also, of course, use a, a mixer if you don't feel like doing this by hand. I have to be pretty motivated to get my mixer out because I don't like cleaning it. So these are easy enough to mix up by hand. Bring your dry ingredients back in, mix them together. And depending on exactly what kind of flour you're using, etc., you might find you want to add this, add a splash of almond milk if they're too dry, or another tablespoon of flour. And I have a little bit of a wild card here today because I added the wheat germ. So that might alter the texture. So we'll see how we do here. Whoops. But essentially, you know what a cookie texture is, and that's what you're looking for. And because this isn't really wet, you have to do a little bit of work to get it all mixed in together. But the reward is worth it. So I preheated my oven to 350. And once we put them in, they'll cook for about 12 minutes. And I'll come back to show you what they look like once they have cooked up. But yeah, that's looking great. So I think the wheat germ was a great add. Anytime you can get another nutritious ingredient into something that is going to, also into a chocolate chip cookie, no less. I think it's going to add a really nice extra little, kind of texture to it as well. So I quite like wheat germ. So you do want to have, you do want to have either a nonstick cookie sheet or use some parchment paper for this because these are going to be a little bit sticky. I like to use a scoop just to keep them about the same size. And so let me move this so you can see what I'm doing. All right. So I'm just literally going to, I like to make these pretty small. You can make them bigger if you want, but I'm usually making these because I have a craving for something sweet. So often just one is enough. And if it's not, then I don't feel guilty about eating. I don't feel bad about eating 2 or 3 of these because they're pretty small. And they do freeze well. So you can make some, put them in the freezer. I do usually, they don't change much in shape, although again, the wheat germ might affect that. I don't think it will. But so I usually sort of get my fingers a little bit wet and shape them a little bit, just press them down. But you do need to have wet fingers because you can see how much it's sticking to my fingers maybe. So this is going to make a nice tray of cookies. I'll finish the rest of that and then I'll come back and show you what they look like once they're cooked. But I did want to, just a couple of other things I wanted to mention about tips in terms of cooking, baking, and adjusting recipes. So I really recommend, if you've been in any of my classes or you've been following the videos for a while, you know that I often, sort of encourage you to taste and adjust recipes to what you have in your fridge and what you have on hand and so on. I with baking, if you're just starting out with plant-based baking, I think it's a really, really good idea to follow recipes quite closely at first, just so that you can get an idea of how these different ingredients act, what they're doing in the recipe. And if you can pay attention as you're going and kind of think about, okay, so the chia or the flax is replacing the egg, what does that look like? And especially sweeteners, it's quite interesting. When I was in cooking school, I had to do some exercises making the same cookies with maple syrup, with a regular like cane sugar, and then a coconut sugar. And it was amazing to me. It was such a great learning experience, because how different the results were based on the type of sugar I use. That has a huge impact. Also, the type of liquid you're using has an impact, the type of flour you're using. So it's a great idea to follow the recipes until you can kind of get a feel for that. Or if you're going to adjust a recipe, start with one thing at a time. So if you're going to adjust a recipe that you love making and it uses butter and plant-based milk and regular sugar, then start by taking out the egg and using a flax egg instead, and see what that does. And then, and then go from there. I still encourage you to experiment and try these different things, but there are so many wonderful recipes out there. I think it's a really good idea to just get your feet wet by following some of those recipes first, especially when you start. So I'm going to come back and I will bake these up, finish measuring them out. I'll bake them up and then I will show you what they look like. So I'll be back momentarily. Okay, these have just come out of the oven after 13 minutes, and you can see, I'm going to give you a close up. They are beautifully formed. They have a nice crust on the bottom, and they're a bit hot, but I'm going to break one open. Oh, I think it would be better to let them cool, but who can wait? So good. So I hope you enjoy them. If you make them, let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. If you have any questions, I love the wheat germ edition. By the way, I'm going to add that to the official recipe. And there is one more thing I wanted to share with you as we're wrapping up the Veganuary series. And that is, if you are looking for ways to crowd out some of the foods that you don't want in your diet and add more of them, one of the tools that I haven't mentioned yet is the Daily Dozen app by Dr. Greger. You can get it on, in any app store. Just look for the Daily Dozen, and it gives you his dozen things to get into your daily diet. And there are reasons for each one of them that you can find in How Not to Die, his first book. And I find that a really, really wonderful tool for helping people to basically crowd out those foods that you don't want and get the nutritious foods in that you do. And it kind of helps you to be, sort of get a really good feel for the types of foods that you should be including and getting in on a regular basis to make sure that you're getting all the nutrition that you need on a healthy plant-based diet to help to reduce inflammation, reduce your risk of chronic diseases, help you age, help you increase your chances for healthy aging, cognitive and physical. So there's so many wonderful benefits to doing this, to living this way. And aside from the health benefits, of course, the benefits to the planet and to the animals is a very compassionate lifestyle as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I will be back with my regular videos next week. I think probably I'll do a session on answering questions, because I've had a few come in over the last month that I haven't really had the opportunity to address. So I'll probably address some of those. So if you're one of those people, be sure to watch out for that episode number 28. If you have a question, this would be a great time to send it in. So fill out the form below, and I will address it in probably next week's issue. Or issue. I'm a writer, you can tell, in next week's session. And If you have other questions or you want to reach out by email, it's really nice. Many of you are reaching out by email, and I love hearing from you. So stay in touch, stay healthy, stay inspired, happy plant-based eating, and I'll see you next week.